Hello, everyone. Welcome back to section 8.6 of chapter 8. In this section, we're going to talk about waiting room sizes. Except for waiting for the receptionist, people are waiting in a common waiting area we call the waiting room. First, we're going to add a storage element called waiting room, and we're going to create two generic process. One we call the waiting room entered, and next we're going to call the waiting room leave. We'll call the exit waiting room, which is insert and remove entity from this waiting room. Okay. Next, what we're going to do, we're going to create a detached queue for animation purpose to show you how to line up the waiting room and animate the waiting room. So adding waiting room enter. So after processing for the registration, we insert the waiting them into a waiting room. Okay. We only remove them when they start getting service. Okay. Also, when they enter the driving test, they join the waiting room. Also, they enter the service picture, taking picture, they enter this waiting room. Also, exit waiting room, when we exit at the output of the server registration, and also before processing for the driving test or before processing for the picture, we remove them from the waiting room. 8.7, we're talking about appointment arrival. Okay, appointment arrival also. We're going to add an appointment schedule and create a separate sources, arrange arrival based on appointment. And the appointment arrival usually have higher priority than the walk-in. Also, sometimes this appointment arrival has a no-show probability. And these appointment arrival can have early and sometimes have late. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to create a data table using datetime column to define the exact appointment they have on a daily basis. Here I have from the 8:30 in the morning all the way to 10, I have 4 arrival. And from 2 to 3:30, I have another 4 appointment arrival. We call it scheduled arrival. And this, we can add a separate source, okay, to simulate the appointment arrival. Instead of using time vary arrival, we're using arrival table, which is the scheduled arrival. And then we have arrival time deviation. Arrival time deviation right here represents random per, -10, -3, and 5. -10 is they could probably come in 10 minutes early or 5 minutes late, but most likely will be 3 minutes early. And no-show probability right here represents that there's a 5% of a chance the scheduled arrival won't show up. So we're going to set all the scheduled arrival to 2, so they have a higher priority. Okay, adding a specific statistic for only calculate the so-called time in the system for scheduled arrival and for the walk-in arrival. All right. And each one of the in the server, we're going to using, instead of a smallest value first, we're going to using largest value first. So give the scheduled arrival higher priority, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right, let's do that. See how the model works. So we're going to start building this model from 8.6. I'm going to do waiting room size. Come back to the definition elements. Okay, we're going to define a storage for that. Okay, define a storage, and we're going to call this waiting room. I'm going to call it storage waiting room. Okay, so this is just a regular storage and call it waiting room. I'm going to create two more generic process. One, we call this waiting room enter. The other one called waiting room leave. Okay. The waiting room enter has a very simple stuff. We're going to just insert. Okay. And which one going to insert to? Just for this waiting room queue. The other one I'm going to do is remove. Okay. Remove from the waiting room. Remove from storage waiting. Okay, that's it. So what I have is insert to the waiting room and remove from the waiting room. Okay. From room. This guy insert going waiting. Okay, so that's all there's to it. So several times we need to do is first we're going to after processing, okay, we're going to do for add-on process after processing, we're going to waiting room enter. Also, in the driving test and the picture portion, when we enter these two stations, we're going to join waiting. Okay. And also, for these three stations, when they before processing, we're going to let them exit the waiting room. Actually, when you leave, exit here, I'm going to do a waiting room link. Okay. Or like a textbook, we can do just like a textbook. What we can have is in the each one of the section for the process busy, I'm just going to S this right here. We call it adding an execute command, after it start getting busy, okay, I'm going to execute a certain process, and this process is waiting room D. You see that? So after I change the status to busy and I remove the entity from the queue, also before processing, we can remove them from for these two stations. Okay, so when they enter, they join the waiting room, and when they before ready to get processed, we're going to remove them from the process. Also, now I'm going to have drawing a animated queue. Okay, I'm going to do it like that, something like this. Okay, and this is queue state is called. The queue state is called storage queue. Okay, and then I'm going to start building some of the. We're going to adding certain direction, so oriented point. We're going to start adding point. Okay, do the same. Okay, do the same thing. I'm going to kind of line them up facing to the inside. Okay. Add a couple more. All right, let's line them up. All right, so they all face inside in the waiting room, facing to each other. And this orientation represents the facing direction for all the entity in the waiting room. All right. So now we can see the waiting room portion. If we start running. You now see somebody who stay in the waiting room. When they the arrival pickup, and there are more going to be stay in the waiting room. That purpose. All right, pretty much what we need. This is our waiting room, and it is a so-called queue elements. It's a generic storage. So the entity before, after they process by the registration, they join the waiting room, and also upon arrival to the driving test and the picture, they actually stay in the waiting room, and then whenever they leave the registration heading to the test, they remove from the waiting room, and also the same thing, the driving and picture test after, right before they start processing the pictures and start taking the driving test, they remove from this. So you can also see they are all heading inside, okay? And the next thing is a so-called schedule arrival, which is fairly easy. I'm going to start doing that. Stop the simulation, create a data table. I'm going to create a table called table arrival. And adding a column, basically is the daytime column I have. And this is appointment. Fine. Okay. Here what we have is should be able to is today's day and probably 8:30 to begin with, okay? 8:30 I have one arrival. The next will be 9 o'clock. Next will be 9:30. Mm. 9:30. Okay. And 10, one more. 10 o'clock. And also then 2 to 3:30 we have a couple. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. And then 2:30. PM. And 3. And 3:30. 3:30 p.m. So we have 4 from 8:30 to 10 and 4 from 2 to 3:30. So this is our appointment. We can add more later on. Then we're going to kind of adding another source right here. So we call this source schedule arrival. All right. And this we're going to rename it to source walk-in. All right. All I have to do is just make a connection between here to that. So join these two arrival together. And this guys is still generate applicants, but I'm using a arrival table, and arrival tables should be appointment time, and each arrival have one applicants. We can have more in that sense. All right. And also we're going to have a so-called this arrival per and also arrival deviation should be a random per. Okay. That will be between -10 minutes, -3 minutes, and 5 minutes late. So it's early, 10 minutes early, 3 minutes early, and 5 minutes late as a deviation. And arrival no-show probability should be 5%, 0.05. This should be a minutes portion. All right. So this is pretty much what we have for 8.6 and 8.7. And I'm going to skip some of those. Oh, here. one more thing. And when you come in here, we're going to increase the priority equals to 2. Okay. So when entity was created, and I'm going to assign that to after we create it to add-on process. Pretty simple. I'm just doing a assign, right? And just setting the model entity priority equals to 2. So the walk-in has a priority of 1, and the scheduled arrival has a priority of 3. And each one of these, we will give appointment arrival, okay, instead of first in, first out. I'm going to using largest value first based on their priority. So that's fairly easy, and to complete the 8.7 and so on, so forth. So we're going to conclude this section, and we come back to talk about so-called controlling this simulation runs and the replication length and so on. So we'll conclude it right here.